The door burst open without warning, interrupting the intimate moment between Misan and Sarah. They were pressed against each other in his office, lips locked in a passionate kiss that had made them forget where they were. Sarah's hands were tangled in Misan's hair, his arms wrapped tightly around her waist as he lifted her slightly off the ground. The world had ceased to exist for those few stolen moments, their hearts beating in sync, their breath mingling as they lost themselves in each other. Then came the sound of the door handle turning, followed by the unmistakable click of expensive heels against the marble floor. Sarah gasped and pulled away from Misan, her face flushing crimson as she smoothed down her blouse with trembling hands. Misan's entire body went rigid, his expression shifting from passionate to horrified in the span of a heartbeat.
He knew those footsteps.
He knew that particular rhythm, that confident stride that announced ownership rather than permission. The woman who stood in the doorway was breathtaking in a way that seemed almost weaponized. She wore a crimson Chanel suit that hugged her curves perfectly, her long black hair cascading down her back in waves that looked professionally styled. Diamond earrings caught the afternoon light streaming through the floor-to-ceiling windows, sending fractured rainbows dancing across the walls. Her lips were painted a deep red that matched her suit, curved into a smile that didn't quite reach her cold, calculating eyes. "Oh my," the woman said, her voice dripping with false sweetness as she pressed one manicured hand to her chest in mock surprise.
"I'm so sorry.
I didn't realize Misan had company. Should I excuse you too?" The words hung in the air like poison, made all the more toxic by the fact that she had already seen everything. There was no pretending, no salvaging the moment. She had witnessed their intimate embrace, had interrupted something private and precious, and the satisfied glint in her eyes said she knew exactly what she had done. Misan opened his mouth, his jaw working as he prepared to say yes, to tell her to leave, to demand she wait outside like any normal person would have done. But before he could form the words, Sarah spoke first. "No, it's fine," Sarah said, her voice remarkably steady despite the embarrassment coloring her cheeks. She adjusted her blazer one more time and picked up the folder of documents she had brought for their meeting. "I should get back to work anyway. We can finish discussing the quarterly reports later, Mr. Kang." The formality in her tone created distance between them, a professional barrier erected in the presence of this stranger. Misan wanted to protest, wanted to pull Sarah back and explain, but he couldn't. Not yet. Not with those calculating eyes watching their every move. Before we continue, please subscribe to our channel and let us know where you're watching from. Don't forget to like the video and leave a comment. Sarah gave Misan a small smile that didn't quite reach her eyes, then nodded politely to the woman before walking toward the door. As she passed, she caught a whiff of expensive perfume, something floral and overpowering that seemed to fill the entire office. It was the kind of scent that announced its wearer's presence long before they entered a room and lingered long after they left. When the door clicked shut behind Sarah, the temperature in the office seemed to drop several degrees. Misan stood frozen for a moment, watching the space where his wife had been, before slowly turning to face the woman who had invaded his sanctuary. "That was so fantastic," Yuna purred, walking further into the office with the confidence of someone who owned it. She trailed one finger along the edge of Misan's desk as she moved, her eyes never leaving his face.
"So passionate, so romantic.
When will I have my own moment like that with you, Or have you forgotten our arrangement already?" She paused near the window, tilting her head as she studied him with an expression that mixed amusement with something darker, something possessive. "I thought you were coming to my hotel last night. I waited for you, Misan. I wore that black dress you used to love. The one from Paris. Remember?" The mention of Paris hit Misan like a physical blow, but he forced himself to remain still, to show no reaction. His hands clenched into fists at his sides, his jaw tightening as rage began to build in his chest like a pressure cooker ready to explode. "Why would you barge into my office like that?" His voice came out low and dangerous, barely controlled fury simmering beneath each word. He pushed away from his desk and stood to his full height, his body language screaming confrontation. You have no right to just walk in here without knocking. This is my private space, Yuna.
Mine.
But Yuna didn't seem fazed by his anger. If anything, she appeared amused by it, like a cat toying with a mouse that still thought it had a chance of escape. She laughed, a light, tinkling sound that grated against Misan's nerves like nails on a chalkboard. Your private space? She repeated, her smile widening. Oh, darling, have you forgotten already? I own 42% of this company. I helped you build this empire when you were nobody, when everyone else said you would fail, when the banks refused to give you loans, when your own family doubted you, I was there. I backed you with my money, my connections, my expertise. So don't talk to me about private spaces and boundaries. There are no boundaries between us, Misan. There never were. She moved closer, close enough that he could see the satisfaction gleaming in her eyes, could feel the power she believed she held over him. In that moment, Misan felt something he hadn't experienced in years, a sensation he thought he had left behind in his old life. He felt worthless, powerless, controlled. Yuna was treating him like a joke, like a puppet whose strings she could pull whenever she pleased. The man who had once commanded respect through fear, who had controlled Seoul's entire underworld with an iron fist, who had made grown men tremble with a single glance, was being dismissed like a child throwing a tantrum. I came to tell you something important, Yuna continued, pulling a small card from her designer handbag. She placed it deliberately on his desk, right in the center where he couldn't miss it. I change hotels. The previous one was nice, but I found something more suitable for our meetings. This is the new address. The Peninsula Seoul, Presidential Suite. Much more private, much more appropriate for what we'll be doing. She leaned in slightly, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. I didn't want to tell you over the phone. Some things are better delivered in person, don't you think? Besides, I wanted to see your face. Wanted to see if you were still trying to pretend this isn't happening. Misan's hand slammed down on the desk with such force that the sound echoed through the office like a gunshot. Paper scattered, his coffee mug rattled, and for a brief second, something flickered across Yuna's face. Not fear exactly, but acknowledgement. Recognition that beneath the businessman's suit was something far more dangerous. But the moment passed quickly, and her smile returned, colder than before. Temper, she chided, wagging one finger at him as if scolding a misbehaving pet. You should save that energy for tonight. I'll be expecting you at 8. Don't be late, Misan. You know how I hate waiting. She turned on her heel and walked toward the door, her hips swaying with calculated precision. Just before leaving, she glanced back over her shoulder, her eyes meeting his with an intensity that promised both pleasure and pain. Oh, and darling, your wife is lovely.
So trusting, so innocent.
It would be a shame if she found out what kind of man she really married, wouldn't it? Think about that before you consider defying me again. The door closed with a soft click, but the sound reverberated through Misan's entire body like a death knell. He stood there for a long moment, staring at the card on his desk, feeling the walls of his carefully constructed life begin to crumble around him. The silence in the office after Yuna left was suffocating. Misan remained standing at his desk, his hand still pressed flat against the polished surface where he had slammed it moments before. His chest heaved with barely controlled rage, each breath feeling like fire in his lungs. The card Yuna had left seemed to mock him, its elegant script announcing the hotel address with the casualness of a social invitation rather than the threat it truly represented. 7 years. 7 years he had spent building a legitimate life, creating distance between himself and the darkness of his past. 7 years of careful construction, of strategic planning, of becoming someone his grandmother could be proud of. Someone Sarah could love without knowing the monster that lurked beneath the expensive suits and polished manners. And now Yuna threatened to tear it all down with the ease of someone ripping up a piece of paper. Misan's hand moved slowly to the top drawer of his desk, the one that was always locked, the one even his assistant didn't have a key to. His fingers trembled slightly as he turned the key and pulled the drawer open. Inside, hidden beneath some old contracts and business documents, was a burner phone. Basic, untraceable, the kind of device that couldn't be tracked or monitored. The kind of phone a man used when he needed to contact people who operated in the shadows. He stared at it for a long moment, his reflection distorted in its black screen. The face that looked back at him was older than the one from 7 years ago, more refined, more civilized. But beneath that carefully maintained exterior was the same man who had once ruled Seoul's underworld with calculated brutality. The same man who had made problems disappear with a single phone call. His thumb hovered over the power button. Once he turned this phone on, once he made this call, there would be no going back. He would be admitting that the businessman Misan Kang couldn't handle this situation. He would be summoning the ghost of who he used to be. But what choice did he have? Yuna wasn't playing by the rules of the business world. She was using blackmail, manipulation, and threats. She was weaponizing his past against his present, holding his marriage and his reputation hostage to satisfy her twisted desire for revenge and control. The phone powered on with a soft chime. Misan scrolled through the contacts, numbers he had memorized years ago but never deleted. His fingers stopped on one name, Ghost. Park Tae-jin. His former right-hand man, the one person who had known all his secrets, who had executed his orders without question, who had disappeared into the legitimate world just as Misan had. The phone rang once.
Twice.
On the third ring, a voice answered, deep and cautious. This number has been dead for 7 years. Who is this? It's me, Misan said simply. The silence on the other end stretched for several heartbeats. When Ghost finally spoke again, his voice carried a mixture of surprise and concern. Boss? After 7 years? This must be serious. Don't call me that. Misan cut him off sharply. That life is over. My name is Misan now. Just Misan. If you're calling me on this phone, that life isn't over. Ghost replied, his tone frank and uncompromising. What do you need? Misan closed his eyes, feeling the weight of the decision pressing down on him. I need you. Tonight. The usual place. The warehouse on the east side? That place is probably condemned by now. I don't care. Meet me there at midnight. Come alone. Misan paused, then added. And Ghost? This conversation never happened. Understood. I'll be there. The line went dead. Misan powered off the phone and returned it to the drawer, locking it away as if he could lock away the implications of what he had just done. He sank into his chair, running both hands through his hair, feeling older than his 32 years. A knock at the door made him straighten immediately, his professional mask snapping back into place.
Come in.
His assistant poked her head in nervously. Mr. Kang, Mrs. Kang asked me to remind you about the department meeting at 3. She said you seemed distracted earlier and might have forgotten. Thank you. I'll be there. The assistant nodded and withdrew, leaving Misan alone with his thoughts once more. Sarah.
His wife.
The woman who had jumped from a penthouse to save her nephew's life, who had agreed to marry him in a desperate bargain, who had somehow become the most important person in his world. The woman who was currently walking around the office thinking he was just stressed about business, completely unaware that a hurricane was about to tear through their lives. He had to protect her. Whatever it took, whatever he had to do, Sarah could never know about Paris, about Yuna, about the man he used to be. She had suffered enough in her life. She deserved peace, safety, happiness. He would give her that even if it meant damning himself in the process. Meanwhile, Sarah sat at her desk 3 floors below, staring at her computer screen without really seeing it. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, pretending to work on a report, but her mind was replaying the scene in Misan's office over and over again. The way that woman had walked in without knocking, as if she owned the place. The possessive way she had said Misan's name, drawing out each syllable like a caress. The knowing smile on her face when she had caught them kissing, as if she had been expecting it, as if their private moment had been a performance for her entertainment. And Misan's reaction. Sarah had seen many expressions cross her husband's face over the months they had been married. She had seen him angry when dealing with his family's interference. She had seen him tender when they were alone. She had seen him focused and determined when handling business matters. But she had never seen him look afraid. Not until that woman walked into his office. Who was she? Really? Misan had introduced her as an old friend, but friends didn't look at each other the way those two had. There was history there, something deep and complicated and possibly dangerous. Sarah's instincts, honed by years of surviving on the streets of Chicago before coming to Korea, were screaming that something was very wrong. Her phone buzzed with a text message. She glanced down, expecting it to be from Misan, but the number was unfamiliar. It was lovely seeing you in Misan's office today. I hope I didn't interrupt anything too important. Would you like to have lunch tomorrow? I'd love to get to know you better. Yuna. Sarah's breath caught in her throat. How had this woman gotten her personal number? And why was she reaching out? The message seemed friendly enough on the surface, but there was something unsettling about it, something that felt more like a territorial claim than a genuine invitation to friendship. Before Sarah could decide how to respond, her colleague Jennifer appeared at her cubicle, holding a stack of files. Mrs. Kang, these are the reports you requested for the quarterly review. Also, I saw you leaving Mr. Kang's office earlier with that stunning woman in the red suit. Is she a new investor? She looked like she stepped out of a fashion magazine. I'm not sure exactly, Sarah admitted, taking the files. She's an old friend of my husband's, apparently. Why do you ask? Jennifer leaned in slightly, lowering her voice. It's just that several people mentioned seeing her around the building. She apparently stopped by the executive floor last week too, but Mr. Kang was in meetings all day, so she didn't get to see him. The security team said she has a permanent access pass to the building, the kind only major shareholders get. I just thought it was interesting since I've never seen her before. Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. A permanent access pass? Are you sure? Positive. My friend works in security. He said her name is Choi Yuna, and she's been on the approved list since the company was founded. Apparently, she owns a significant portion of shares, but hasn't been actively involved in operations for several years. Until now, I guess. After Jennifer left, Sarah sat in silence, processing this information. A major shareholder. Someone who had been there since the beginning. Someone Misan had never mentioned in all their conversations about the company's history. Why had he kept that information from her? Sarah's fingers moved almost automatically, typing out a response to Yuna's text. Lunch sounds nice. Tomorrow at noon? You can choose the place. The reply came back almost instantly. Perfect. I know just the spot. The Azure Room at the Shilla. I'll make a reservation. See you then, Sarah. Sarah stared at her phone, wondering if she was making a mistake. But her instincts told her that if she wanted answers, she needed to understand who this woman was and what she wanted. Mi-sun clearly wasn't going to tell her the truth, not willingly. His reaction in the office had made that abundantly clear. The rest of the afternoon crawled by with agonizing slowness. Sarah went through the motions of work, attending meetings, reviewing documents, responding to emails, but her mind was elsewhere. She kept glancing at her phone, half expecting another message from Yuna, half hoping Mi-sun would call and explain everything. Neither happened. When the workday finally ended, Sarah gathered her things and headed toward the elevator. As she walked down the corridor, she spotted Yuna near the reception area, speaking with one of their junior analysts. The woman's laugh carried down the hallway, light and musical, the kind of laugh that made people turn their heads and smile involuntarily. Sarah slowed her pace, watching from a distance. Yuna was animated, gesturing as she spoke, and the young analyst seemed completely charmed, nodding eagerly at whatever she was saying. Then Yuna glanced up, her eyes locking directly with Sarah's across the space between them. For a moment, something cold and calculating flashed across Yuna's face, there and gone so quickly Sarah almost thought she had imagined it. Then the warm smile returned, and Yuna raised her hand in a friendly wave before turning her attention back to the analyst. Sarah hurried to the elevator, her heart pounding uncomfortably. When the doors closed, she leaned against the wall and exhaled slowly. What game was this woman playing? And why did Sarah feel like she was the one being hunted? The elevator doors opened on the executive floor, and Sarah made her way to Misan's office. His assistant's desk was empty, the overhead lights dimmed for the evening. She knocked softly on Misan's door before entering. He was standing at the window, his back to her, hands in his pockets as he stared out at the Seoul skyline. The city lights were beginning to twinkle as dusk settled over the metropolis, creating a glittering tapestry of gold and silver against the darkening sky. "Misan?" Sarah called softly. He turned, and for a split second before his expression smoothed into a smile, Sarah saw the exhaustion written across his features. The tension in his shoulders, the tightness around his eyes, the way he held himself like a man carrying an invisible weight. "Hey," he said, crossing the room to her. "I was just about to come find you, ready to go home. Actually, I wanted to talk to you about something first." Sarah set her bag down on one of the chairs. "About that woman who came to your office today, Yuna." Misan's entire body went rigid for a fraction of a second before he forced himself to relax. "What about her?" "She texted me. Asked me to lunch tomorrow." "How did she get my personal number, Misan?" "I have no idea. Maybe she got it from my assistant." He rubbed the back of his neck, a nervous gesture Sarah had learned to recognize. "What did you tell her?" "I said yes." Sarah watched his face carefully. "I thought it would be nice to get to know your old friend better. Unless there's a reason I shouldn't." The question hung between them, heavy with unspoken implications. Misan moved to his desk, busying himself with organizing papers that didn't need organizing. "No, of course not. Yuna's just someone I knew a long time ago. We worked together when I was first starting the company. She was one of my early investors." The words came out rehearsed, too smooth, too practiced. "But Sarah, she can be a bit intense. A bit overwhelming. If you'd rather not have lunch with her, I can make an excuse." "Why would I need an excuse to have lunch with your old friend and business partner?" Sarah moved closer, studying his face. "Unless there's something you're not telling me?" Misan finally looked at her, and the expression in his eyes was complicated, a swirling mixture of guilt, fear, and something else Sarah couldn't quite identify. He reached out and took her hand, his grip almost too tight. "There's nothing to tell," he said, but his voice lacked conviction. "I just don't want you to feel obligated to spend time with people from my past. You have enough to deal with." Sarah wanted to push, wanted to demand the truth, but something in his face stopped her. He looked haunted, like a man standing on the edge of a cliff. So instead, she squeezed his hand and forced a smile. "It's just lunch, Misan. What's the worst that could happen?" If only she had known how prophetic those words would turn out to be. They drove home in Misan's car, the silence between them heavy and uncomfortable. Usually, they filled the drive with conversation, sharing stories about their day, making plans for dinner, simply enjoying each other's company. But tonight, Misan stared straight ahead at the road, his jaw clenched, his hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly his knuckles turned white. Sarah watched the city pass by her window, her mind racing with questions she didn't know how to ask. The way Yuna had looked at Misan, the possessive tone in her voice, the fear Sarah had seen flash across her husband's face. It all added up to something dark and dangerous, something that threatened the fragile happiness they had built together. When they arrived home, Mi-sun immediately disappeared into his study, claiming he had urgent work to finish. Sarah stood in the doorway of their bedroom, listening to the muffled sound of his voice through the walls. He was on the phone, speaking in low, urgent tones. She couldn't make out the words, but the tension in his voice was unmistakable. Unable to bear the uncertainty any longer, Sarah pulled out her laptop and opened the browser. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard for a moment before she typed, "Signs your husband is reconnecting with an ex-girlfriend." The search results loaded almost instantly, page after page of articles with titles that made her stomach clench. 10 red flags your partner is cheating. When old flames return. What it means for your relationship. Body language signs your spouse is attracted to someone else. Sarah clicked on one article, then another, reading through the lists with growing dread. So many of the signs matched what she had witnessed in Mi-sun's office. The way he had frozen when Yuna entered. The guilty look on his face. The tension in his body. The way Yuna had touched his desk, his space, with the familiarity of someone who had been there before. But Sarah forced herself to close the laptop before she spiraled completely. She was being paranoid. Mi-sun loved her. He had shown her in 1,000 different ways over the past months. He had stood up to his family for her, had supported her dreams, had made her feel safe and valued for the first time in years. One mysterious woman from his past didn't erase all of that. Did it? Sarah changed into comfortable clothes and climbed into bed, but sleep remained elusive. She lay in the darkness, listening to the sounds of Mi-sun moving around the apartment. He was restless tonight, pacing, opening and closing doors. Once, she heard him on the balcony, his voice carrying faintly through the glass as he spoke to someone on the phone. Finally, around 11:30, she heard him come into the bedroom. He moved quietly, obviously trying not to wake her, but Sarah kept her eyes closed and her breathing even, pretending to be asleep. She felt him pause beside the bed, felt his gaze on her face. For a long moment, he just stood there, and Sarah had to fight the urge to open her eyes and demand answers. Then she heard him move away, heard the soft rustle of clothes as he changed, heard the bathroom door close quietly. When he finally climbed into bed beside her, he stayed on his side, careful not to touch her, careful not to disturb her supposed sleep. Sarah lay there in the darkness, feeling the distance between them like a physical thing. Just that afternoon, they had been kissing in his office, wrapped up in each other, the world forgotten. Now they lay like strangers, each trapped in their own thoughts, separated by secrets and lies. She didn't know when she finally fell asleep, but her dreams were troubled, filled with images of a woman in red, laughing as everything Sarah loved turned to ash. At 11:45, Mi-sun slipped out of bed as quietly as he had entered it. He dressed in dark clothes, jeans, and a black jacket, things that would help him blend into the shadows. Before leaving the bedroom, he stood for a moment watching Sarah sleep, her face peaceful in the dim light filtering through the curtains. His chest ached with the weight of what he was about to do, the world he was about to re-enter. "I'm sorry," he whispered, knowing she couldn't hear him. "I'm doing this for us. For you." The drive to the east side of Seoul took 40 minutes at this time of night. Mi-sun navigated familiar streets that had changed dramatically in 7 years, new buildings rising where old ones had stood, the city constantly reinventing itself. But some things remained the same. The warehouse district was still there, though more run down than he remembered, many of the buildings abandoned or converted to other uses. The warehouse where he had told Ghost to meet him stood at the end of a dead-end street, its windows dark, graffiti covering the lower walls. Mi-sun parked his car a block away and walked the rest of the distance, his senses alert for any sign of danger. Old habits died hard, and this neighborhood still carried the particular tension of a place where illegal business was conducted. The warehouse door was unlocked. Mi-sun stepped inside, his eyes adjusting to the darkness. The vast space was empty except for some old crates and machinery, covered in dust and cobwebs. Moonlight streamed through broken skylights, creating pools of silver light on the concrete floor. "You're late." The voice came from the shadows near the back of the warehouse. Mi-sun turned to see Ghost emerge from the darkness. Park Tae-jin looked different than he remembered, older obviously, but also somehow more refined. He wore expensive clothes, his hair styled professionally, his bearing that of a successful businessman rather than a criminal enforcer. But his eyes were the same, sharp and assessing, missing nothing. "You look good," Mi-sun said. "Legitimate life suits you." "Same to you. I barely recognized you from the photos in the business magazines." Ghost moved closer, his footsteps echoing in the empty space. "I run a security consulting firm now. All legal, all above board. I thought I'd never hear from you again." "I thought the same thing." Mi-sun pulled out his phone and showed Ghost a photo of Yuna. "I need everything you can find on this woman. Choi Yuna. Where she stays, who she meets with, her routines, her connections, her vulnerabilities. Everything." Ghost studied the photo, his expression carefully neutral. "She's beautiful. Also familiar. Isn't she the one who backed you when you started Kong Corporation? The one you were engaged to before everything went south?" "You have a good memory. I remember everything from those days. Hard to forget." Ghost handed the phone back. "What's she done?" "She's threatening my wife. Threatening my company. Threatening to expose things that should stay buried." Mi-sun's voice was tight with controlled anger. "She wants me back, Ghost. And she's willing to destroy everything I've built to get what she wants. And you want me to find a way to stop her?" "It wasn't a question. I want options. Information first, then we decide what to do with it." Ghost was quiet for a long moment, his gaze steady on Mi-sun's face. "You know what you're asking me to do, right? You're asking me to step back into that world. To use old connections, old methods. Once we start down this path, there's no clean way out." "I know." "And your wife? Does she know about any of this? About who you used to be?"
"No."
The single word carried the weight of 7 years of secrets. "And she can't ever know. That's non-negotiable." Ghost nodded slowly. "I'll make some calls. See what I can find out. But boss, Mi-sun, you need to understand something. If Yuna is as connected as she used to be, if she's built up her own network over the past 7 years, this could get very messy very quickly. I don't care how messy it gets. I just need it handled. There are other ways. You could give her what she wants. Buy her out. Negotiate some kind of settlement." "She doesn't want money." Mi-sun cut him off. "She wants control. She wants me, and I won't give her either." The two men stood in silence, the years between them collapsing as old dynamics reasserted themselves. Finally, Ghost extended his hand. "I'll have preliminary information for you by tomorrow afternoon." "Where should I send it?" "Not to my work email. Not to my phone." Mi-sun pulled out a card with a different number written on it. "This is a secure line. Text me when you have something." After Ghost left, Mi-sun remained in the warehouse for a few more minutes, staring at the empty space and remembering all the meetings that had taken place here years ago. Deals struck, alliances formed, enemies eliminated. This place had been his throne room once, his center of power. Now it was just an abandoned building full of ghosts. His phone buzzed with a message. Unknown number, but he knew who it was before he even opened it. "TikTok, darling. 64 hours left. I do hope you're not wasting time plotting against me. We both know how that ends.
Sweet dreams. E."
Misan deleted the message and headed back to his car, exhaustion weighing on him like a physical burden. By the time he got home, it was nearly 2 in the morning. He slipped back into bed beside Sarah as quietly as he had left, but this time when he lay down, he found her awake, staring at him in the darkness. "Where were you?" Her voice was soft but firm, cutting through the silence like a knife. Misan's heart stopped. How long had she been awake? Had she noticed when he left? He forced himself to stay calm, to keep his voice steady. I couldn't sleep. Went for a drive to clear my head. Work stress. At 2 in the morning? Sarah sat up slightly, her silhouette outlined by the faint light from the city outside their window. Mi-sun, what's going on? And please don't tell me it's nothing. I can see it in your eyes. I can feel it in the way you're pulling away from me. He reached for her hand in the darkness, grasping it like a lifeline. I'm not pulling away. I could never pull away from you, Sarah. You're everything to me. Then talk to me. Tell me what's happening. Who is that woman really? Why did you look so scared when she walked into your office? Mi-sun wanted to tell her everything. Wanted to unburden himself of all the secrets he was carrying. But the words stuck in his throat, held back by fear of what she would think of him if she knew the truth. If she knew about Paris, about his past, about the kind of man he used to be. She's just someone from my past trying to cause trouble, he said finally, hating how inadequate the explanation sounded. But I'm handling it. You don't need to worry. Sarah was quiet for a long moment, and when she spoke again, her voice carried a note of hurt that pierced straight through his heart. I thought we promised not to keep secrets from each other. After everything we've been through, after all the lies from your family, I thought we were different. I thought we were honest. We are. I am. Mi-sun pulled her closer, wrapping his arms around her. I just don't want to burden you with things that don't matter. Things that I can handle on my own. But Sarah pulled back slightly, and even in the darkness, he could feel the distance growing between them. That's not how marriage works, Mi-sun. We're supposed to handle things together. That's what partnership means. She lay back down, turning away from him, and the curve of her back felt like a wall he couldn't scale. Mi-sun lay beside her, staring at the ceiling, feeling like he was drowning in quicksand. Every move he made to protect her seemed to push her further away. They didn't speak again that night, but neither of them slept. Batch 5, words 4001 to 5000. The next morning arrived too quickly, bringing with it a bright autumn day that mocked the darkness of Mi-sun's thoughts. Sarah was already up and dressed when he emerged from the shower, her movements efficient and distant as she prepared for work. The warmth that usually existed between them at breakfast was gone, replaced by polite coldness that hurt more than anger would have. I have that lunch with Yuna today, Sarah said as she gathered her things. At noon, the Azure Room. Mi-sun's coffee cup paused halfway to his lips. You don't have to go. I can call her and cancel. Why would I do that? Sarah's eyes met his, challenging. You said she's just an old friend.
Just someone from your past.
So there's no reason I shouldn't have lunch with her, right? The trap in her words was obvious, but Mi-sun had no way to escape it without revealing more than he was ready to share. Of course. I just thought you might be busy with work. I'll make time. Sarah picked up her purse and headed for the door, then paused. Unless there's something you want to tell me before I go? Something I should know about your old friend. Mi-sun opened his mouth, the truth hovering on his tongue. But fear held it back, fear of losing her, fear of her seeing him for what he really was. Just be careful. Yuna can be manipulative. She likes to play games. I can handle games, Sarah said quietly. What I can't handle is being kept in the dark by my own husband. The door closed behind her with a soft click that sounded like a period at the end of a sentence. Mi-sun sat alone at the breakfast table, his coffee growing cold, feeling like he was watching his marriage crumble and unable to stop it. His phone buzzed. A text from Ghost. Preliminary information ready. Can meet at 10 a.m. Same place as last night. Mi-sun typed back quickly. Make it my office. Side entrance. Use the name Park J1 for security. The morning crawled by with agonizing slowness. Mi-sun went through the motions of work, signing documents, attending a brief meeting, responding to emails. But his mind was elsewhere, split between worry about Sarah's lunch with Yuna and anticipation of what Ghost would reveal. At precisely 10 o'clock, his assistant buzzed to say Mr. Park was there to see him. Misan told her to send him in and to hold all calls. Ghost entered looking every inch the successful security consultant, carrying a leather briefcase that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. He waited until the door was fully closed before speaking. "You're not going to like what I found," he said without preamble, opening the briefcase and pulling out a tablet. Choi Yuna has been very busy over the past 7 years. He swiped through several screens before handing the tablet to Misan. "She's not just a major shareholder in your company. She's built her own empire. YC Holdings owns property all over Asia. Real estate, tech companies, manufacturing. Her net worth is estimated at over $8 billion. Misan scrolled through the information, his sense of unease growing with each page. How did I not know about this? Because she kept it separate from her involvement with Kong Corporation. Different holding companies, different shell corporations. Very sophisticated structure." Ghost pulled up another document. But here's where it gets interesting. About 3 years ago, she started making connections with some very dangerous people. The next image showed Yuna at what looked like a private party, standing beside a man Misan recognized immediately. Wei Chen, head of one of China's most powerful criminal syndicates. The kind of organization that made Misan's old operation look like a street gang. "She's been in bed with the Chen family for years now," Ghost continued. "They've been wanting to expand their operations into Korea, but they needed someone with legitimate business connections and local knowledge. Yuna has been their bridge." Misan felt his blood run cold. "What kind of operations?" "Everything. Money laundering, smuggling, corporate espionage. They use her companies as fronts." Ghost swiped to another screen. "And here's the part that directly involves you. 6 months ago in Paris, at that international business conference you attended, Yuna was there too. But she wasn't there for legitimate business." The next photos made Misan's stomach drop. They showed him and Yuna together at the conference, but taken from angles that made their interactions look far more intimate than they had been. One photo showed them having dinner, leaning close to hear each other over the restaurant noise. Another showed them leaving the hotel together, Yuna's hand on his arm. A third showed them in what looked like an embrace, though Misan remembered it had been nothing more than an awkward goodbye hug. "These photos have been doctored," Ghost said, zooming in on one image. "See the shadows here? And the timestamp is wrong. These were taken at different times and edited together to look compromising. She's been planning this for a while, Misan. This isn't about rekindling old feelings. This is about control." "What does she want?" Misan asked, though he already knew the answer. "Access to your company, your connections, your reputation. If she can force you into a relationship, if she can get a seat on your board, she'll have everything she needs to help the Chen family establish their operations in Korea. You're not just a former lover to her. You're a strategic asset." Misan set the tablet down, his mind racing through the implications. So Paris was a setup from the beginning. She knew I'd be there. She engineered those situations to create compromising photos.
Exactly.
And now she's using them as leverage. Ghost pulled up another file. "But there's more. I did some digging into her current situation. She's staying at the Peninsula Seoul presidential suite, like she told you. But she's not alone. She has a security detail, former Chinese military, trained in close combat. For men, rotating shifts. They're serious professionals. You said she trained in Kung Fu and Karate in China. Is she still active in that?" "More than active. She's maintained her training religiously. According to my sources, she spars regularly with professional fighters. 3 months ago, she put a business rival in the hospital during a physical altercation. Broken ribs, fractured jaw. The man was 6 feet tall and had military training. She demolished him in under a minute." Misan absorbed this information grimly. Yuna wasn't just dangerous because of her connections or her blackmail material. She was dangerous physically, a trained fighter with the willingness to use violence when necessary. What about vulnerabilities? He asked. Everyone has something. Ghost hesitated. There's one thing. She has a younger brother, Choi Min-ho. He's been in and out of trouble for years. Gambling debts, mostly. She's bailed him out repeatedly, but he keeps getting in deeper. Last I heard, he owes money to some very unsavory people in Busan. People who don't take kindly to unpaid debts. She cares about him? According to everyone I talked to, he's her only real weakness. She's ruthless in business, cold in her personal relationships, but she's protective of her brother. Ghost closed the tablet. But Misan, if you're thinking of using that leverage, you need to understand what you'd be doing. Threatening an innocent person, even indirectly, that's a line we swore we'd never cross again. Misan was quiet for a long moment, staring out his office window at the Seoul skyline. 7 years ago, he wouldn't have hesitated. He would have done whatever was necessary to eliminate a threat, regardless of collateral damage. But he wasn't that man anymore. Was he? Keep digging, he said finally. Find out everything about her routines, her schedule, her weaknesses. I need options, Ghost. All the options. After Ghost left, Misan sat alone in his office, the weight of the situation pressing down on him like a physical burden. At 11:45, his phone rang. It was Jae-hyun, his friend from yesterday. I heard you met with someone from the old days, Jae-hyun said without preamble. Word travels fast, Misan. You're playing a dangerous game. I don't have a choice. There's always a choice. Look, let's meet for coffee. I need to talk some sense into you before you do something you can't take back. They met at a quiet cafe near the office, tucked into a corner booth where they could speak privately. Jae-hyun looked worried, his usually cheerful face drawn with concern. You need to accept Yuna's terms, he said bluntly. Give her what she wants. It's the only way out of this that doesn't end in disaster. You want me to become her plaything? To spend 3 nights a week with her while my wife waits at home? Misan's voice was low and dangerous. You want me to cheat on Sarah? I want you to stay alive. I want you to keep the life you've built. Jae-hyun leaned forward, his voice urgent. Misan, Yuna isn't just some scorned ex-girlfriend. She's connected to people who make our old crew look like Boy Scouts. If you go to war with her, you won't win. And even if you somehow do, what will it cost you? My marriage will cost me more. Your grandmother doesn't know about your past, does she? About the things we did, the people we hurt, the empire you built on blood and fear. Jae-hyun's eyes were serious. If this gets messy, if it goes public, she'll find out. That sweet old woman who raised you, who thinks you're a legitimate businessman, she'll learn the truth.
Can you live with that?
The question hit Misan like a punch to the gut. His grandmother, the woman who had taken him in after his parents neglected him, she was so proud of what he had become, of the company he had built. If she found out the truth about how he had started, about the kind of man he had been, it would break her heart. I'll figure something out, Mi-sun said, but his voice lacked conviction. No, you won't. Because there's no good solution here. Either you give Yuna what she wants and live with the guilt, or you fight her and risk losing everything, including your wife when she finds out who you really are. Jae-hyun stood up, preparing to leave. Think about it, Mi-sun.
Really think about it.
Because the clock is ticking, and when it runs out, there won't be any good choices left. After Jae-hyun left, Mi-sun sat alone with his coffee, watching the steam rise and dissipate. He checked his watch. 11:55. In 5 minutes, Sarah would be sitting down to lunch with Yuna. The thought made his stomach churn with anxiety. What would Yuna tell her? What seeds of doubt would she plant? What lies would she mix with just enough truth to make them believable? Sarah arrived at the Azure Room 5 minutes early, wanting to scope out the situation before Yuna arrived. The restaurant was elegant and exclusive, the kind of place where business deals worth millions were negotiated over delicate courses of French-Korean fusion cuisine. She was led to a private table near the window with a stunning view of the city. Yuna arrived exactly at noon, making an entrance that turned heads throughout the restaurant. She wore a white Dior dress that hugged her figure perfectly, her hair pulled back in an elegant chignon that emphasized her cheekbones. She smiled warmly when she saw Sarah and crossed the room with graceful confidence. "Sarah, you look lovely," Yuna said, air-kissing both her cheeks in the European style.
Thank you so much for meeting me.
"I know you must be terribly busy." "It's my pleasure," Sarah replied, matching her polite tone. "I'm always happy to meet Misan's friends." They ordered lunch, making small talk about the restaurant, the weather, the state of Seoul's business district. Yuna was charming and engaging, asking Sarah questions about her background, her role at the company, her adjustment to life in Korea. On the surface, it seemed like a perfectly pleasant lunch between two women. But Sarah could sense the calculation behind every question, the way Yuna's eyes watched her reactions, measuring and assessing. This wasn't a friendly get-together. This was an interrogation disguised as lunch. "So tell me," Yuna said after their appetizers arrived, "has Misan told you much about his past? About how he built Kang Corporation?" "Some," Sarah said carefully. "He started with investors and grew it systematically over the years." "Investors like me, you mean?" Yuna smiled, taking a sip of her wine. "I was there from the very beginning, you know. When Misan was just a young man with big dreams and no money. I believed in him when no one else would." "That was very generous of you." "It wasn't generosity. It was love." Yuna set down her glass, her gaze direct and unflinching. "Misan and I were engaged once." "Did he tell you that?" Sarah's heart skipped a beat, but she kept her expression neutral. "He mentioned you were close." "Close?" Yuna laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Oh, we were much more than close, darling. We were everything to each other. We built that company together, stayed up nights working on strategies, dreaming about the future. We were going to get married, merge our businesses, create an empire together." "What happened?" Sarah asked, unable to help herself. "He got scared. Success changed him. He started wanting to distance himself from his past, from the people who had helped him get there. From me." Yuna's expression turned sad, vulnerable. "It broke my heart when he ended our engagement. But I understood. Sometimes men need to prove themselves, need to build something on their own before they can appreciate what they have." Sarah felt a chill run down her spine. The way Yuna was talking, it sounded like she thought their story wasn't over, like she was just waiting for Misan to come back to her. "That must have been difficult," Sarah said diplomatically. "But Misan and I are married now. He's moved on." "Has he?" Yuna pulled out her phone and scrolled through it with deliberate slowness. "I wonder, did he tell you about Paris? About the business conference 6 months ago?" Sarah's mouth went dry. "He mentioned he attended a conference there." "He did more than attend." Yuna turned her phone around, showing Sarah a photo that made her world tilt. It showed Misan and Yuna together at what looked like a romantic dinner, leaning close to each other, his hand near hers on the table. The intimacy in the image was unmistakable. "We spent the weekend together," Yuna continued, her voice soft and almost sympathetic. "Rekindling old flames, remembering what we used to have. He told me about you, of course. About the marriage arrangement, the business deal with his family. He seemed so trapped, Sarah. So unhappy." "That's not true," Sarah said, but her voice wavered. "Misan loves me. Our marriage isn't just a business arrangement anymore." "Are you sure about that?" Yuna swiped to another photo, this one showing Misan and her leaving a hotel together. "Or is that what he's told you to keep things running smoothly? Men like Misan, men with power and ambition, they're very good at compartmentalizing. Very good at telling people what they want to hear." Sarah felt tears burning behind her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. Not here. Not in front of this woman who was clearly trying to manipulate her. "Why are you showing me these?" "Because I care about you, believe it or not." Yuna's expression turned sympathetic, almost kind. I know what it's like to love Misan, to think you have his whole heart when really you only have the part he's willing to show you. I don't want you to be blindsided like I was. I don't want you to invest years of your life only to discover he's been living a double life. Is that what you think he's doing? Living a double life. I think Misan is a complicated man with a complicated past. I think there are things about him you don't know, things he's worked very hard to keep hidden. Yuna leaned forward, her voice dropping to a confidential whisper. Did he tell you what he did before he started the company? Where the initial capital came from? The kind of people he associated with? Sarah's hands clenched in her lap. His past doesn't matter to me. I love who he is now. That's very noble. But can you really love someone you don't fully know? Yuna sat back, signaling for the waiter to bring the check. I'm not trying to hurt you, Sarah. I'm trying to help you see the situation clearly. Misan and I have history, connections that go deeper than marriage certificates or business partnerships. He'll always come back to me. It's inevitable. Is that why you're here? In Seoul? Sarah's voice was stronger now, anger beginning to burn through the hurt. To try to win him back? I'm here because what's mine was taken from me 7 years ago. I'm simply reclaiming it. Yuna stood gracefully, gathering her purse. Thank you for lunch, Sarah. It was enlightening. I'm sure we'll be seeing much more of each other in the coming weeks. Here's my card. If you want to know more about his past, call me. I will always be available. She left a stack of bills on the table and walked out, leaving Sarah sitting alone with a half-eaten meal and a head full of poisonous doubts. Sarah sat there for another 10 minutes, trying to compose herself before returning to the office. Her hands shook as she paid the additional tip and gathered her things. The photos Yuna had shown her were burned into her brain. Misan and Yuna together. Looking intimate. Looking like a couple. 6 months ago. Right around the time Misan had started saying he loved her. Right around the time their marriage had transformed from business arrangement into something real, something precious. Had it all been a lie? Had he been with Yuna in Paris while telling Sarah he was falling for her? The thought made her physically sick. If you enjoyed this story, be sure to subscribe because even more incredible chapters are on the way. Leave a comment with your thoughts on what Sarah should do next, and hit that like button if this tale kept you on the edge of your seat. Also, leave a comment for what you think would happen in the next chapter. Until the next part, stay strong, stay fierce, and remember, the greatest strength often comes from protecting the ones you love.
Peace.